Zion Williamson's Media Day appearance signals a dramatic shift. Year 7 could redefine his career and the Pelicans' future. We're going to break it down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Wednesday, and we had Pelicans Media Day yesterday. It was very insightful. We're going to be breaking this down all this week, probably into next week as well. But we are going to start with Zion Williamson today because, OMG, did you see him? Do you see how good he looked? The hype is real and it's back again. I want to break down just how he looked different, the Joe Dumars impact on how that's made a change in his approach, and why I actually believe this might really stick this time. So we've got a lot to cover in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We're going to have a lot of exclusive content on here from a number of interviews I had on Media Day, cleaning those up. They will be posted very, very soon for y'all to see, and we'll use them in the shows as well. But we have to focus on Zion Williamson, the biggest story, the biggest part of the team. You know, he looked incredible. He looked incredible. There's no other way to put it. He looked very good. In my notes here, you know, I always have my open, then the first segment and some notes, second segment, third, and sometimes they're long, sometimes they're short. This one is just like hyped around Zion Williamson. That's the note. He looked good, right? You could physically see it. Look at his face. And I don't like to dive too much into the weight or the appearance necessarily, but his face just looks dramatically different from literally 1 year ago. Look at him in the photos that they took in the promos and things like that. It's on the thumbnail of this episode. It's a very big transformation. And a theme of this show will be, well, we kind of have seen this before. Are we actually going to believe it this time? It's year 7. But here's the thing. We haven't really seen him look this good ever going into training camp. You know, Trey Murphy III said he's, quote, slimmer than I have ever seen him during the summertime, end quote. You know, Zion Williamson said, you know, I haven't felt like this since college, high school, where I can walk in the gym and feel good. When asked like what he did differently, you know, he gave praise to Daniel Bove, basically the Pelicans head one of the trainers and things like that, saying, you know, last year he sat down, they talked through it, came up with a plan, needed things to just get done, and they created fun, different workouts that were engaging. And Zion said he felt a shift in his body last season, and said, quote, it feels good to feel good, end quote. Having that mindset is something I don't think we've really ever seen from Zion Williamson before. Feels good to feel good is not probably been his mentality, his mindset at all with this, right? That kind of level of trust in the player performance and care team probably hasn't exactly been there before. Saying he hasn't felt like this since college, since high school, college Zion was like someone we've never seen, right? That's the one of one from Zion Williamson. So while some of this will be like, we've heard him say all the right things before, he wins every press conference that he has. This is different. This is different because it dates back to last season, I think, a little bit. We'll talk more about this in the third segment here. He looked incredible last season. When you look at his numbers and his stats last year, they were out of control. 24.6 points per game, 7.2 rebounds, which ties a career high, 5.3 assists, which is a career high, 1.2 steals, which is a career high, 0.9 blocks per game is a career high, while getting to the free throw line 8 times. And he did that all in under 30 minutes, 28.6 minutes. If you look at it on a per 36-minute basis, he basically set records across the board. Per 36 minutes, 31 points, 9 rebounds, 6.7 assists while getting to the line 10 times. Those are all career highs for him per 36-minute stats. And while he won't play 36 minutes, if he's playing 32, 34 minutes, somewhere in that range, game changer for what he could do. That's 1 block per game. That's a steal and a half per game from Zion Williamson. The buy-in on the defensive side of the ball last year, for all the criticism that I've given him this offseason of not playing games and can you build around that, when he was playing that version of basketball, that's the Zion you want. That's the Zion you believe in. And if he's taking care of his body and looking this good, yeah, that's the type of Zion Williamson you can get behind that you think can be a very special player. Those are MVP level numbers here. Something about this seems different with Zion Williamson. Something has changed, right? And again, we've all been here before. We've been here before. I've said this every year, right? We're on Zion 7.0. We've had Zion, then there was Zion 2.0, 3.0, and look at what it's, gotten this team in a sense. But there is definitely things we can point to this time that we haven't been able to point to before. And that is the highly encouraging part about all of this, right? Like that's what's incredible. Working with Daniel Bove and sitting down, talking it all out, figuring it all out, and getting each other's input on how to make things work. He said he was boxing, doing work on the football field, just different fun workouts. He might win press conferences and say all the right things, but we haven't seen him doing that kind of stuff. And that's where you should be hyped about Zion Williamson. You should feel really good about Zion Williamson. I know I've been very critical of him this offseason, right? And I don't think I've said anything, out of bounds or anything like that. I think the criticism has been fair. And Zion even had his comments, when talking more about national media, but who knows, maybe he's talking about me, or just others too, that you got to stay where you are from there. And I disagree with that, right? If you were critical of the team at the beginning, saying they're not going to make the playoffs and they're good, you can't kind of like switch. I disagree with that. I think when you get new information, you change your opinions. When you learn more, you change your opinions. And seeing a different version of Zion Williamson in the past, look, we're going to give him praise and credit when that's due. He still needs to prove it a little bit more. Brian Windhorst on ESPN after Zion's media day appearance basically said, look, this is great, but actions speak louder than words. Here's the thing, though. While you might call media day words, I think there are actions there that we've seen. He looks different in a way that we've never seen him at this point in time. He usually plays himself into shape during the season, which means all the point leading up to that is not the best version of Zion, and that is thus costing the team wins. You're not going to say that this time. We're not going to say that at all this time. Something is definitely changed, and I am very excited about it, to be truthfully honest with y'all. Very excited about how good Zion Williamson looks and is acting. And what's changed, right? Well, let's answer that next. That truthfully just might be the Joe Dumars effect. Let's break down that and what Zion Williamson said coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. They've been with us, FanDuel, a long time. $300 in bonus bets might be the best offer I've ever seen. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping into the action live as the game unfolds. A lot of fun. You can also get the NBA futures. You want Zion Williamson at plus 2,500 odds to win MVP after this? It's not looking too bad right now. Just makes everything more exciting. It's quick, it's easy, and easy as well. You can get fast payouts. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets with FanDuel over at FanDuel.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We might be up over 12,000 after this show here. I'm pretty hyped. I think you're probably pretty hyped too. So this is going to be, it's going to be an interesting season regardless. So I'm very excited for it. For Media Day stuff, by the way, interviewed one-on-one Willie Green, Kevon Looney, Herb Jones, Eve Meese, Trey Murphy, Jordan Poole, and Jose Alvarado. The Jordan Poole interview is fantastic. The audio is a little bit wonky right now, so I'm going to spend the rest of the evening cleaning that up, but we'll have these posted on YouTube soon. We'll use them in the shows the rest of the week as well. Looking forward to you seeing these interviews and these players. It's going to make the Jordan Poole one is fantastic. Like, fantastic. He's going to be a fan favorite. You're really going to like that one a lot. Very insightful. And it's going to lead to a show that we're going to talk about later in the week. I'm going to admit I was wrong on something from last week, and it came from these conversations. Goes to that idea of when you get new information, you know, your opinion can change, and that's not a bad thing. And I'll explain what that is. Has to do with like a big theme around this team that it was kind of eye-opening to me, and I really enjoyed being able to learn a little bit more about that. So, for your second listen, it's Locked On Saints. Ross Jackson was actually there at Media Day helping me out. Big Locked On family. Make Locked On Saints your second listen today. Can they do anything? He's going to be breaking down some special teams, by the way, so I'm doing the work in between interviews. Make Locked On Saints your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So what's causing the change for Zion Williamson? You know, for him to feel this good. A big part of it, I think it's just the Joe Dumars impact. This is really important. Joe Dumars, you know, and the Pelicans have kind of been raked over the coals, lambasted for that draft night trade, for even the Jordan Poole trade and all of that. You know, but the most important thing from Joe Dumars is what does he do to or with Zion Williamson? Does he trade him? Does he get him to be the best version of him? That is the most important thing Joe Dumars can do. And you're already seeing that impact with Zion Williamson. Quote, I like Joe. What you see is what you get. He's going to hold me. Well, hold on, let's start with that. I like Joe. What you see is what you get, end quote. He really has connected with Joe Dumars. He said that when that change happened and Dumars stepped in, you know, this summer, the first thing he was trying to do was build a relationship with Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver. Building the relationship with those guys, connecting with them. Not saying that David Griffin never tried to do that, but look, they didn't do that successfully in the beginning here. Joe Dumars, simply being Joe Dumars, has made that impact already. Zion Williamson said, like, you know, they'd be times they'd be having a conversation and he looks over and he goes, wow, like, this is Joe Dumars. Hall of Famer, NBA champion, right? Bad boy Piston, you know, a player that he grew up watching and thinking about and learning about. That's really exciting. He didn't watch him play because of when he was born, but you get the point that I'm making. You know, that I think just immediately gets some buy-in from these players. That the way that Joe Dumars approaches things, the fact that he's a former player really does seem to connect with them immediately in a way that just others can't. You're not kind of part of that brotherhood, that fraternity of being a former NBA player, so maybe you don't get it as much, even if you've been around the teams a long time or in the league for a while in different roles. Stuff tends to have some sway with these guys. I like Joe. What you see is what you get. The bigger thing is this, quote, he's going to hold me accountable. And as he holds me accountable, he's going to give me a lot of responsibilities as well. I'm excited for it, and I look forward to it. I know he's going to hold me to a really high standard, and if I slip up or anything, I know he's going to be right there to make sure I get right back on the path, end quote. Zion is saying he wants the responsibility, that he wants the accountability to be pushed, essentially, to be the best version of him. This I find interesting. This leads me to kind of like the first big thing here. You know, and I was doing a lot of the one-on-one interviews and didn't get a chance to talk to Zion Williamson one-on-one at Media Day, and I wasn't in the room for the media availability that he had there. But one of the things that I would have asked that I'm curious about and will ask in the future, you know, is did you not have that kind of being pushed on you before, right? You know, the big question is for me is, was the last regime, the last infrastructure around you not pushing responsibility, not pushing accountability on you, like not holding him to a high standard? Because look, they were. There's no getting around this. They tried to find leadership for him. They encouraged him to take leadership roles, and Zion did not embrace it then, for whatever reason. That's a fair criticism to say. There's no NBA team that's not trying to like hold their star player accountable. They suspended him for being late last year for a team playing, right? You guys are late all the time. You rarely hear about a suspension for it. Like, it takes a lot to do that. So for them to suspend him for a game, like, that really says something here. They were trying to make sure that if he slipped up or anything, that he was going to be back on the right path. It didn't always work. It didn't always take. This is the idea of like leading a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You can put the right stuff in place around him, but if he doesn't want it himself, then it's not going to matter. So him saying like, I'm ready for this. I want this. I'm excited for it. I look forward to it. That is a growth mentality of Zion Williamson. David Griffin and that group, they were doing it. Maybe not in the proper way, but they were doing it, and Zion could have embraced all of this, right? You just do it or you don't. But maybe it's Joe Dumars kind of getting through to him in a different way, and Zion Williamson having kind of the light bulb go off, that epiphany moment about who he wants to be, what he wants to be, how he wants to go about doing things. It's really exciting, I think. One of the things for that comes down to, I'll read you the quote here. Quote, we sat down and we had some man-to-man conversations. They, Troy Weaver, Joe Dumars, the rest of the organization, embraced me. I just told them, I'm not going to let y'all down. Quote, if they believe in me that much, it helped a lot. It helped a lot that they really believed in me. And like I said, man-to-man conversations, they're going to hold me accountable. But with that accountability, they're giving me a lot of responsibilities and I'm here for it, end quote. It's that idea of that they really believed in him. They embraced me. They believed in me in a way that maybe he hadn't had before with some within the organization, right? One of the things around this reported was that, Joe Dumars was under a mandate to trade Zion Williamson. Then, in theory, maybe pushed back on that and was like, no, I want to keep this guy. That's going to make you as a player feel incredible, right? Everyone wants to feel wanted. That is one of the number one things I've learned when it comes to NBA players is they want that. Everyone kind of wants that, right? That's just a human thing. And, with David Griffin, it's the will they, at one point they tried to trade him to Portland. Medicals were exchanged. I've reported on that. That was, I wouldn't say close to happening, but a very realistic possibility. And then he gets fired. And then they bring in someone who reportedly has a mandate to trade Zion Williamson and then goes, you know what? No, I like this player. I believe in him. I want to keep him here. Zion is going to feel empowered. He's going to feel better than he ever has before. He's going to feel supported in a way that he hasn't had before. And that's the type of thing that makes someone rise up. And so the way Joe Dumars has handled the whole Zion Williamson situation, then, while he's been here, I think is really, really encouraging. Joe Dumars will get mocked. And I know ESPN had the off-season review where you vote on what was the worst move, who had the worst off-season. Pelicans kind of ran away with that one. But this is the type of thing that doesn't get talked about enough. This is the type of thing that goes beyond trades, right? Whoever makes the big trade and then their team does well is going to win executive of the year and that kind of thing. Will get voted on in the offseason for they won the offseason and all that. You traded for Kawhi Leonard. How's that worked out, right? The Clippers won it when they traded for Kawhi and Paul George. What have you gotten from that? This is the bigger thing. This type of impact that isn't really going to get reported on widely outside of this local market is much more impactful than any move that you could make. If Zion Williamson lives up to his full potential, his hype, right? Who cares about trading away that future first round pick for Derek Queen? That pick's going to be in the 20s. I don't care anymore, right? All of a sudden that trade looks entirely different. If this team makes the playoffs, a lot of it's going to be a lot of other players. Jordan Poole, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, and all that. Talk to them. They're all great guys, and I'm excited to share those interviews with you. But a lot of it's going to have to do with Zion Williamson being healthy. And they really believe that they can do something like that right now. And getting Zion to kind of be the way he is, I think is living up to all of it is really, really encouraging. And at this point, I care less about some of the trades that Joe Dumars has made, and I feel a whole lot better that they hired him because of where Zion Williamson is right now. And I still think this is mostly on Zion. He had all that infrastructure to be a leader before. There was accountability around him before. He just didn't care, I think. Maybe not care, but I don't know. There was something that wasn't letting him embrace it in that way for whatever the reason might be. But you look at him now, and things feel very, very different than they did just even a couple of weeks ago. And let's talk a little bit more about that. and why it feels like this is actually a true difference. But where should you land on like we're hyped up versus we are prove it to me? It's probably somewhere in the middle. I'll explain. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everyday. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Don't forget, follow along on YouTube. I'll have the full interviews up there. We'll probably use clips in the show going forward. Maybe not one of the full interviews, but those will all be there. We'll get those up once I clean up the audio just a little bit. Just take some work. So bear with me. Sorry about that. But it was a very fun media day. Very cool to see all the players there as they get ready to head to Australia in less than a week. For your second listen, it's Locked On NBA Game Night. I'm back on Wednesdays on Locked On NBA Game Night all season long. We're going to be recapping all the games from Tuesday night, but also there were other media days. Jason Tatum might be playing. Josh Hart kind of jokingly requested a trade. Go give Locked On NBA Game Night make it your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we're talking about Zion Williamson and why things just do feel different this year. And so when you kind of add it all up, that's what makes me excited. Y'all, the everydayers kind of know this. I've been down on Zion Williamson. I just think it's tough to build around a guy. You know, he's kind of the ultimate paradox, as I had been saying. He's so good that you can't really give up on him. You know, the fan base felt the same way with the fan survey that we did. That basically it's like you can't trade him because he could be so good, but at the same time, you can't really build around him. That's a problem. What do? You're kind of stuck. And now all of a sudden, you kind of see this and it changes that, right? If we were to run the same survey again after his media availability today and when that's been passed around, people would vote very differently. I can guarantee you that. And that's because, well, a lot of people, Brian Windhorst on ESPN was like, you got to prove it. Show me your actions. You're seeing some of the actions already. Like you're seeing some of the actions. This isn't just words. And you have to stretch it back to last season too. And that's important. You know, while he only played 30 games, he could have played more. It could have been closer to like 50. I think I did the math and it was like 56 games maybe. We would be viewing him differently. And even at times I forget about that a little bit. But this is someone who is that special of a player. And when you look at what he was doing on the defensive side of the ball, that to me is the most encouraging thing. That to me is what makes one of the biggest differences here. You know, you can see the buy-in with Joe Dumars and him liking Joe Dumars and wanting to kind of like play for Joe Dumars in a sense. That's good. You need that. But it's also him doing what he did last year. He was in shape. He stayed in shape. We have seen him be in shape, go through the offseason, then come in out of shape. That's not the case this year. That is an actual difference. That is an action that has already kind of been checked off and completed. Are you going to try on the defensive side of the ball? Check. He did that, right? Those guys that carry such an offensive load don't often do that because, well, you need to conserve energy for offense and you're just tired. But Zion did it last year. Isn't a minutes restriction? We'll see it, you know, when he's on the court and, you know, what that looks like. But overall, like he's kind of checked that box too. By the way, the Pelicans were better when he was on the court by 3 points defensively per 100 possessions. Their defensive rating improved by 3.1 points when he was out there on the court. That's how impactful Zion Williamson can be, right? And that's just on defense. On offense, they were 8.2 points per 100 possessions better. Gives them a net rating of 11. They're better with him on the court by 11.3 points per possession. That's per 100 possessions. That's a lot. That's a lot. You know, the players saying something's different about Zion Williamson shows his impact, right? The team was garbage last year, but when Zion played, they were actually very, very good and graded out really, really well. I love that. That's what you want to see, right? Like that's exactly what you're looking for with him out there. And if he's healthy because he's doing the right things, and it sounds like he is, talking about working with the trainers, right? Again, just trying on the defensive side of the ball goes a very long way with me. He has shown that maybe like he's turned the corner, the light bulb's gone off, we're in Zion 7.0, and this is the one. If you want to be a little bit like wait and see, totally understand. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? Some of this is just words. I think there are actions to go along with those words, though. But most of it, truthfully, yeah, just words. But there are actions there, too. If you want to be cautiously optimistic rather than hyped, totally fine. I get it. That makes a ton of sense. That's kind of where I am when it comes to it, I think. So when you look at this, though, it bodes well for this team. There's enough talent here between him, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Jordan Poole, the rest of the guys that they can be a very good team. In what exact capacity, I'm not sure just yet, but there's something that could be very, very good here. Don't forget, it was very limited possessions, but DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, Yves Missi in 108 minutes was a plus 13.7 in terms of net rating. Real limited sample size, but they were really, really good. That's what you want to see, right? You're still getting Zion, Trey, Missi potentially, but you're putting in Jordan Poole for CJ McCollum, so call that even, right? And then you're just throwing Herb Jones in there too and the impact he has. When we talked about on-off numbers just a second ago, Herb Jones was a plus 11.7. That's how good he is. So he's right in that mix too of making an impact. You hyped up about Zion Williamson? You hyped up about the Pelicans after this? Do you think things are different? Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. So we'll have more to come from Media Day the rest of the week here. I'm going to say I was wrong about something. I'll tell you when that show's coming out too. That's going to be a lot of fun because I really believe in all of that. We'll have the interviews on there as well. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be back with you all tomorrow.